Truth over mainstream propaganda every single day. Hi, my name is Michael Evans, and I'm your host, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. Join me daily for important guests and my unique slant on hot topics in the news. Visit americasvoicenow.org for even more news, articles, and commentary, and watch our show streaming live to your PC. Share your morning with me. Get educated, informed, motivated, and activated. America's Voice Now, right here on 107.1.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Mike Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We have 3 one-hour segments, which is unusual. On Saturdays, as you know, we do a 3-hour show. Monday through Friday, we're 1 hour. I'll be joined this morning by Mike and perhaps Fast Eddie. We don't know. I think I'm going to rename him Crazy Eddie because I'm from Jersey and there used to be a guy out there named Crazy Eddie. It's easier for me to remember. With the latest news on the immigration bill, I want to touch on a couple of different topics today. And we hope that you'll stick with us and be able to ride with us for the morning. I want to deal with this immigration issue because, one, it's going to go to the House next, and this is an absolute non-starter for us as a nation. If this immigration bill, or even any vestige of what the Senate passed, gets through, we are sunk as a conservative nation because we'll never recover from what they're attempting to do. So our commitment and our obligation has to be that we're going to defeat this immigration bill, and we have to make it clear that the only way in which we're going to be willing to accept this is by seeing first a verifiably sealed border. And I don't mean verified by Janet Napolitano, and I don't mean verified by anyone other than the boots on the ground, which would be immigration or ICE. I want to hear from the actual men and women who are there on the border. I don't want Congress to sit there and give us some kind of a snow job that, well, we've got the border verifiably sealed because statistically it's down by 32%. No, I ain't buying it. It has to be, one, a verifiably sealed border by virtue of the statements of ICE, the boots on the ground now, not some, compromised head of ICE either. And secondarily, we need to have a citizen ombudsman who co-approves or co-verifies. Now, I want you to understand the concept of an ombudsman first and foremost, because it's something that is missing from American politics. And it's something that is so crucial to us and so important to us that most Americans don't even know what the word ombudsman means. So we're gonna dig into that a little bit today. And I want to make it clear what it is, and then I want you to start the resounding noise that says we want ombudsman for everything.
Is that kind of like czars?
No.
Rather than have a czar, have an ombudsman.
Actually, a czar and an ombudsman are two opposing factors.
Oh, good.
So this is the opposite of a czar, folks. An ombudsman, and I'm not quite sure even where the term got coined or who coined it or where it came from, but what they are is a non-involved or they're an objective observer. An ombudsman is someone who, and I was introduced to the term, here's a perfect analogy that taught me what it was, and you'll get it when I say this. When I was a young fella, my mom, along with her other many duties, decided that she was going to be an ombudsman for seniors. She had a passion for seniors in nursing homes and things like that. And she became an ombudsman, which meant that she went to senior communities and observed and was basically a monitor to make sure that they were adhering to the requirements, the rules, the regulations, the good quality treatment that these people deserved. And if she found that they were not doing their job properly, it was her obligation and her duty to stand up and say, nursing home XYZ is mistreating their patients. They're not giving them their medication. They're allowing them to lay in bed too long and get bed sores, whatever the case may be. And it's a voluntary position. She wasn't paid for it. And therefore, she couldn't be compromised. Now, everybody thinks their mom is as pure as the driven snow, but in my case, that's the truth. And there was no way that anyone could have ever gone to her and said, Joyce, if you just accept this donation, or if you accept this, or if you don't do what we tell you, we're gonna spill the beans on this. There were no skeletons in her closet, and she was the kind of person that you couldn't compromise. She didn't care about money, so you couldn't have compromised her if you wrote her a $10 million check. So the point is that she was a watchdog over the organization, whatever that organization was. In her case, it was senior communities. Now, the idea of an ombudsman in a political environment is a little bit different, but it has the same basic function. And that is that you choose an individual or a group of individuals, because ombudsmen can also be groups that are, in the case of the borders, let's use that as the example since that's our topic this morning. You would have an ombudsman group. Well, one guy can't possibly be able to dig into the weeds and watch all that's going on. But you might have an ombudsman group that has 100 members. You know who would be a good candidate for that? The Minutemen. So now here's what happens. The Minutemen, they're already on the field with these guys, right? They're out there every day observing what's really going on the border. First of all, it offers a couple of things. It creates, fosters, and demands accountability. It demands accountability out of the ICE officer,
Border
patrolman, who might be on the take and let somebody slide across the border. It offers accountability to the management of ICE, who say, well, we're going to leave that whole segment of the border go slack this week. No, we're not.
Thank you for playing.
Exactly. And why? Because somebody said to him, listen, on the week of July 3rd, you're going to abandon Sector 308.
Right.
Okay? And he knows that there's $25,000 in a paper bag underneath mailbox XYZ on the corner of 4th and Main in Dallas.
Which is something for people to realize. It took me a long time to catch on to this. When you talk about corruption exists everywhere in the world, period.
Of course.
The difference...
From the dog catcher to the president.
But the biggest difference in this country is that whereas in South and Central America and places that we like to look down our nose at...
It's expected and open.
And you can pay law enforcement officials to do things, overt things that are illegal.
Right.
Okay? In this country, the majority of the corruption is overt. People get paid to not be someplace.
Right.
They get paid to
not
overlook something. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. Not that we don't have the covert segment. Okay.
Right.
But the covert segment in this country is very small. The overt segment. I'm sorry. The overt segment of corruption in this country is very small.
Right. I understand.
The covert section
is huge.
Okay, is huge.
Right.
Okay.
Covert is omission.
Right.
Right. Whereas overt is if you do this. Now, overt would be, Senator, if you don't vote for this bill,
right,
we're going to show this picture of you with a straw up your nose, snorting candy off a mirror.
Right.
Okay. That's overt. Covert is, Senator, when this vote comes up, be on a bathroom break.
Yeah, don't make the vote. Yeah.
Make sure that you are, since you can't vote for it and retain your position because your citizens who you allegedly represent will lynch you, what you need to do is go on vacation that week.
Well, I will tell you that.
Call in sick.
I will tell you that within the ranks of U.S. Customs, we had a famous guy that was covert, and his name was Charlie Jordan. And years ago, what happened is Charlie was in charge of the schedules for all the Go Fast boats that patrolled all the South Florida area.
Right. There you go.
And what Charlie did is that when there was going to be an airdrop in a particular area where those boats would be,
that sector was a ghost town, right?
Yeah. All those vessels would have been scheduled because he was in charge of the schedules. Okay?
Right.
He would schedule all those vessels to be on patrol in other sectors.
Right.
And it was like I'm going to say close to a 2-year manhunt to find him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big black eye for Customs.
In other words, so you knew somebody was doing it, but you couldn't figure out who and how and where and why, and they finally dug them out. I got you. Yeah. So anyway, here's the idea, guys. An ombudsman, and I want to stay on the topic here. An ombudsman is a civilian who has oversight authority. Now, when I say that, that means, and that person may have to be given, some kind of security clearance, and they have to have a background check. I mean, they got to, especially if they're going to be investigating and keeping an eye on the goings on of whatever they're overseeing. And there may be situations in immigration and customs and enforcement, ICE, where for all intents and purposes they're going to have to be subjected to secret information, right, or classified information. So this can't just be Joe. It's got to be somebody who, one, has an understanding and knowledge and understanding of how their system works. A retired guy like Mike would be a perfect example of a guy who would be a good qualified ombudsman. Why? Because he knows the process, he knows the system, he knows the game, and he knows the players. And he's able to walk in there and say, something stinks here. I know the operation and I know how it works. And something's not right when all the boats are on the west side of the bay, when they're all supposed to be equally scattered about the bay, okay? And so that type of thing is what an ombudsman does. Now, they cannot be a government employee, because once they are and they're paid by the government, there goes your objectivity, right? And they cannot answer to government. They hold government accountable. Big, big difference. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Do you owe more on your home than it's worth? Maybe Harps can help. Harp Refinance mortgage loans address this property value issue in most cases. No appraisal needed. Higher debt ratios are acceptable. Call the Center for Sound Consumer Advice today. 1-800-819-6545. Get the free consumer protection guide. Harps, everything you need and had better know. Free while they last. To anyone who asks. Call 1-800-819-6545.
My name is Manny Morales. I'm 45 and I coach youth football. It's still hard to believe because the high school me
was a work in progress. But big brothers, big sisters give me a real role model. And the young me
needed a role model bad. My big brother's name is Ray. And Ray is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a role model himself.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Okay, so we're back. The idea of ombudsman puts an entirely different approach and level to everything that goes on our behalf, or at least allegedly on our behalf. The reason why I say that is because once you have an individual who isn't corruptible or can't be compromised, and when I say corruptible, I mean they can't be an employee of the government, because as soon as the government controls their paycheck, they control their thinking and their objectivity, right? Now they're subjective, because they're told, hey, listen, if you want this job, and we know that's the case, because we see it in every government agency and every government employment organization. If you want your job, you're going to do what you're told. Perfect example is the IRS, right? All these people in the IRS were doing what they were told to keep their job. They knew it was wrong, but they did it anyway. So an ombudsman is not fiduciarily responsible to the government, and the government has no claim over their job, their hiring, their firing, and or their observation tactics. And so an ombudsman on the border, or a committee of ombudsmen, however you want to reference it, would be able to literally sit in on staff meetings, interact with senior executive ICE and border control management. They would be able to look into Janet Napolitano's activities and say, something's wrong here. Why is Janet telling us that the border is sealed when we can statistically prove that we've got more people coming over the border than we've ever had before?
So they're not beholden to...
Right, they're not beholden to anyone in government. They owe their allegiance and their fiduciary responsibility not to government, but to the people. And this policy and principle can work across the board, whether it's the Senate, whether it's immigration, banking, whether it is energy, it doesn't matter. Any sector where there is an organization that is responsible, a government agency for all intents and purposes, right? How about an ombudsman on the EPA who would say, wait a second, why are you sitting there and taking this guy, this family? You ever hear about that family that bought a piece of land and they're still in a court battle? And I mean, they took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they're still being persecuted.
They took it to court and won, and then the EPA said, yeah, but if you do what we're talking about, we're still going to fine you $37,500 a day.
A day, yeah. Right? Now, an ombudsman would walk in there and say, hey, wait a minute, stop right there. And here's what the ombudsman has that a government employee doesn't have.
It's a conscience.
Well, that too. But from an application standpoint, they can say, I'm opening an investigation. That's the big difference. I'm not asking Congress to hold a committee hearing because they've already been sold out and compromised. I'm holding an investigation, and I have the power to subpoena people, and I have the power to call in an independent special prosecutor as, when, and if, and where needed. And I grant you don't do that for every little thing, but here's the point. Mike, I want you to understand this. They're a professional whistleblower. Paid for, not by government, but by the American people. And their sole function is to be a whistleblower. That's the difference. Could you imagine if we had an ombudsman organization monitoring what the NSA is doing? We wouldn't have a need for an Edward Snowden.
No, he'd disappear, though.
Well, right. They may have a short career span. I won't disagree with that. But my point is this. An IRS ombudsman, and by the way, these organizations exist, but they exist in such a dampened capability and functionality that for all intents and purposes, they're impotent.
Well,
right?
Theoretically, the Supreme Court is supposed to be the ombudsman,
but it's too unwieldy.
For the whole nation.
That's like trying to cut butter with an I-beam, steel I-beam. Okay,
but the problem is the Supreme Court, which was originally envisioned by the founders as being a totally separate entity from the government, is now a part of the judicial branch of the government.
Although our founders warned us that once you make judges paid by the federal government, they no longer have an obligation to be objective because they are now an employee and therefore a slave of the government. And honestly, look, what you can see, and you see it every day lately. You have you have all three branches that are supposed to be watchdogging each other, right? You have all three branches who are working in concert now rather than being a checks and balance system. So essentially the executive declares something. The Department of Justice, which is the judiciary, is supposed to then counteract that and say, Mr. President, you can't do that. That's illegal. But Eric Holder says, I'm for it. I second that. And then they both take it to the court, and then they buy off Judge Roberts, who says, I think that's okay to do. I mean, it's like, it's like going it's like a little mob organization. And they act like they're independent, but the truth is they're not. And you can go from one godfather to another godfather, but don't make any mistake about it. Between the time you left Godfather 1's house and got to Godfather's 2 house to explain your problem, Godfather 1 was on the phone to Godfather 2 saying, hey, when this guy comes over here, here's what you're going to tell him. Okay? So here's what the problem is. There's no accountability, objective accountability. There's only the promise that government will be accountable to us. And we can clearly see where that's gotten us. So the idea of an ombudsman in all reaches, all walks, all avenues, all areas is one that we absolutely must have in the new republic. And I say the new republic because this idea has legs, but it'll never have legs in our current political infrastructure, and I'll tell you why. They'll never let it happen. They'll never let it happen. On the flip side of the fence, as we move forward and we become a new republic, the phoenix of liberty and constitutional government that rises from the ashes of deceit and lies and betrayal, we have to have a place and a plan where we know what our policies, our procedures, and how we're going to guarantee accountability going into the future. And I'll tell you why we have to have that. If we don't, today's freedom fighter becomes tomorrow's tyrant. And I can tell you that virtually every government that has ever been dissolved by a coup or by a political revolution or military revolution, however you want to look at it, revolution period, almost every one goes through these iterations of birth and unbelievable turmoil. Many of them never make it through the first year. It's like starting a business. And perfect example right now is Egypt, right? Morsi's been in power for less than a year, and already they've tried to throw him out 4 or 5 times. Now, why? Well, because he is doing wrong. That's why. But you see, he's gained and he's got so much enormous power over the military and over the judicial process and over the legislative process that nobody can oust him. The concept of an ombudsman makes sure and ensures that the people have an objective representative who's looking out for them. Now, that's technically supposed to be Congress.
Technically.
But here's the problem. We know that doesn't work, and we know why.
Money.
Exactly.
Money.
And here's what you need to recognize. The difference between a congressman and an ombudsman is an ombudsman is not responsible for legislation. He's not responsible to read a 1,200-page bill.
Oh, wait a minute. Congress is not responsible for legislation either.
Well, okay, but we're talking about in theoretical matters, right? Not practical application.
Okay.
But when you talk about an ombudsman, they're not responsible. Their responsibility is not to manage. Their responsibility is to oversee the manager to make sure that someone's watching the watchers. That's all they do. Nothing more, nothing less. And they have the wherewithal, the ability, and the freedom to step out and say, New York Times, have I got a story for you? Do the implications of this strike anyone yet? In other words, they have the ability to be professional, hired whistleblowers, hired and paid for by us. I don't care if we create a separate spending pool out of tax money. I would willingly pay that tax. I would pay that tax in a heartbeat.
Me too.
I would have no problem whatsoever paying for what I knew to be a truly objective monitor who was going to look out for my best interests and didn't have to get voted in and wasn't corruptible for money and wasn't corruptible because his job hinged on it. Think about it, America. I want you to take a few minutes and listen. I'm not some brilliant, this is a concept that's old as the hills. The problem is that we're not applying it. And so I want you to put your creative, critical thinking skills into play and figure out, write it. Put your thoughts on paper. Don't just mull about it while you're sitting on the bowl. Do something about it. Put your thoughts on paper, and let's get it out there.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. President Obama in South Africa meeting with President Zuma in a joint press conference. Our president paying tribute to former leader Nelson Mandela.
Saying the country's transition from apartheid to a free nation was a personal inspiration.
To see what happened in South Africa, the power of principle.
President Obama won't be meeting Mandela, still critically ill in the hospital, but will instead meet with his family later.
Fox Radio's Emily Wither.
Business and trade is top of the agenda for this visit. The president saying he doesn't feel threatened by investment on the continent from other countries such as China, but he wants Africans to question if the deals are always good for them.
And in California, 4 plaintiffs in the Supreme Court case that overturned the state's gay marriage ban have exchanged vows. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Visit our outstanding sponsors, West Plains Pawn, located on Route 160, about a mile past Walmart on the right-hand side. West Plains Pawn can be found on the web at westplainspawn.com. You can also reach them via telephone at 417-256-3000. The battery station at 303 Washington Avenue, right off the square in West Plains. They can be reached via telephone at 417-257-7799. They can also be found on the web at batterystation.com. My friends at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. Brian can be reached at 870-492-4030, and he's located at 3225 Route 62, 1/2 mile east of Walmart in Mountain Home. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. They have an outstanding lunch special buffet. You can have salad as well as pizza and other pasta, so you can have something tasty and something healthy. Bill Stone over at Stone Construction at 2930116. Bill Stone does remodeling, custom and new construction, light commercial, farm work, pretty much the gamut. If you're interested in doing some kind of a new project, make sure that you give Bill Stone at Stone Construction an opportunity to bid on that job. And my dear friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, number 2 Evans Arcade, right off the square in West Plains. She can be reached via telephone at 255-2253. She's got the best damn bakery in 100 miles. And thanks so much to our phone line sponsor, Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. You can call us on the Wits End Classic Barbershop hotline. He is on the square in West Plains. Excellent opportunity for you to get your hair cut. Get over there and visit.
Heaven knows how to fix a proper price on something as celestial as freedom. That's Thomas Paine from The American Crisis. But the words before that are, these are the times that try men's souls. I believe the Republic is what the Republic is today because you're still standing. But we have a long way to go, and there's more tough times ahead. But freedom is worth it.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Weekdays from 2 to 5, it's Glenn Beck on the Ozarks' Best News Talk 107.1.
Weather sponsorships are now available on News Talk 107.1 The Point. Get more information, email info@diamondmediaradio.com for complete details.
From the Point Weather Center for this morning, a mainly clear sky. It's going to be mostly sunny through the day with a slight chance for a thunderstorm. The high temperature 82 degrees. Partly to mostly cloudy tonight, low near 60. Tomorrow, mix of clouds and sun with a thunderstorm possible, high 78, sunny Monday. I'm meteorologist Jim Rinaldi. For more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
Kim Commando, aka the Digital Goddess, keeps you plugged in with a daily feature. Kim Commando's Digital Minute. This segment keeps you informed with what's going on in the technology world, along with new tips and tricks to use at home to improve those computer skills. Catch Commando at 7:22 a.m. during Cooper & Company on the Ozarks Best News Talk. If the feature has you craving more, join Kim, the Digital Goddess, Saturdays from noon to 3 on the Ozarks Best News Talk, 107.1 The Point.
Okay, so the idea of and please understand, I am not taking credit for the principle of ombudsmanship. It existed long before I'd ever even heard the word. What I'm saying is we need a resurgence of that concept. Because when someone is not independent, they are ideologically inbred. And that's Fast Eddie. They are ideologically inbred because they don't have the ability to stand outside of their role. And Mike gave me a list of quotes from John Adams this morning, and I found the perfect one that really clarifies that point. So just hear me out and then understand the principle. Powers always sincerely, conscientiously believe themselves right. Power always thinks it has a great soul and vast views beyond the comprehension of the weak. Wow.
That's like, what, 3 sentences?
Which sums up most of the foibles of man.
It's like a sledgehammer.
Power always sincerely, conscientiously believes itself right. Power always thinks it has a great soul and vast views beyond the comprehension of the weak.
2 sentences. 2 sentences.
The concept of ombudsmanship means that with objectivity, they don't have power that they can abuse, but at the same point in time, they are the one who checks the great soul and vast views who believe that they are above the comprehension of the weak.
But how do you keep them honest over the long run? Because here's the thing.
You purge them.
Okay.
We're on radio. You can't just nod your head. You got to say something.
Is that like I was talking about taking Uncle Sam to the sit down to drop the kids off at the pool?
You've got
a little regulatory.
You got to purge.
X-lax there.
You got to purge. It's never a career role. You see, here's the point. It takes citizen involvement, and it should either be done on a voluntary basis, or it should be done for. It's not a career position. But the goal of an ombudsman is merely to be a reviewer of policy, procedure, access, so forth. They have a short term, and they can be moved around.
Yeah.
And let me quantify how I mean that. When I used to work in the telecommunications industry, we used to have a phrase that was called getting rounded out. And when you got rounded out, what that meant is that you worked for this large corporation, and you worked in a role specific. But after a while, once you'd mastered that given role, they pulled you out of that role and they stuck you in another role that was not quite parallel or ancillary, but similar in terms of scope and level. But the goal was that you learn multiple facets of the business, right? And you learn those multiple facets so that when you are, because you're being groomed effectively for management. Now, in a management role, you have to be able to understand exactly what's going on in all different departments, right?
Yep.
So they pull you out of being a lineman in the field. Now that you know everything that there is to know about climbing poles and monkeying around with wire in the rain, now they pull you out of there and they stick you in the switch room. Get it? Now they pull you out of the switch room and they put you in customer service. Now they pull you out of customer service and they put you over in billing. Then they pull you out of billing. You get the principle? Now when you become a manager, you're like, Well, I know billing. I know customer service. I understand the technical aspects of the switching system. I understand what the line and the pole climbers go through every day. I've been in the motor pool, so I know what they deal with. And now you have a well-rounded basis by which to manage because you've got knowledge, factual, actual knowledge, not academic, but practical, that you can apply across a broad range of different aspects of the business. And there's absolutely no reason why a guy, and I'm going to use you as the example.
Uh-oh. Oh, boy.
No, because I used you earlier, and I'm going to use you again. Listen, you let the government use you every day. Why can't I?
That was only 27 years in the feds and a little less than 8 years in the state and local.
Yeah, he's an old fart. Unless he started at 5. So
there you go.
The idea is a guy like you who knows the federal system of, tell him what department you worked for.
I worked for U.S. Customs.
Okay.
And then later we became Customs and Border Protection as part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay. So you know Customs and you know border control, right? Border security control, whatever. You'd be a perfect candidate as a retiree and not necessarily in border control. And here's why. You know those guys. You're compromisable. However, you also understand the federal system of procurement, acquisition, personnel management, law enforcement, drug interdiction. Am I making my point here? So I can take you and I can stick you in a role anywhere other than border enforcement.
Right. And you know I'm with it. The only thing that I see that would have to be guarded against is that any bureaucracy that you create, regardless of whether it's government or private industry or some independent body, any bureaucracy reaches a point in its maturity where it ceases to
have its
serve
effectiveness.
the function.
It becomes dulled like a knife after hard use.
And it starts to exist to perpetuate itself.
I get it.
So how do you guard against that?
Perfect question. Glad you asked it. I'll give you that $1 later.
Riddle me this, Batman.
Right. I promise I didn't cue Mike up with that question, but it's the right one. Here's how you do that. One, if you look at ombudsman organizations out there, and by the way, the word is spelled O-M, like Oscar Mike, Bud, B-U-D, Bravo, Uniform, Delta, Ombudsman. So you can look it up on the internet. Every one of these organizations out there is predominantly built and created and designed by whom? Retirees from an industry. They're almost always people who have some inside knowledge about the industry that they're overseeing or monitoring or objectively supervising, right? And they're holding people accountable. Now, in your case, I don't want you back in ICE enforcement. And I don't want you back there because you know too many people, and you might be tempted to let something slide because you know that guy and he's always been a good guy, and back when you guys worked together, you went through something in the jungle in Guatemala. And
back in the day.
You get my point, right? However, I could take your skill set and apply it towards another area because you still understand the concepts and the principles there, but you don't know any of the players. But you still understand the operational aspects of that function. So I can put you in there because you've rounded out. Okay? So I take you and I say, I'm not going to put you in customs and enforcement. That may be your area of expertise, but I can't trust you there. And so I can't trust you there, so I'm going to put you in charge of something else, but similarly related to where you don't know any of the players. And you've only got a short term of operational longevity there because, one, you're retired. So there's a natural aspect to not being able to abuse your position. For one thing, it can't be a lifelong thing because you're going to die. Two, well, of course, it could be a lifelong thing if you die, but the idea is you'd serve a term of 2 years, 3 years, right? And that the perfect term might be 2 years, but with this, no, here I'm gonna go right there. He's holding up 3 fingers. We're on radio, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Well,
he's holding up three fingers like as if the audience can hear.
There's got to be a.
You sound like that girl who's testifying in the Zimmerman trial that she could hear grass.
Oh, there you
wet
go.
Grass.
Yeah, it's like cold snow, crunchy.
I can hear it. I can hear cold snow versus dry snow.
Yeah, it's crunchy.
My point is this: 3 years is the perfect window, but here's what you need to have. You need to have 2 years followed by 1 year of training your replacement. Boom. Now, why? Well, because guess what he's doing while you're training him? He's watching you. Your new trainee is learning the ropes from you, but he's also coming in fresh, objective, motivated, activated, and he's looking for dirt, including on you.
All right.
And you're showing him the ropes. This is you're introducing him to the players. And honestly, there's no reason why an ombudsman can't do a year in this group, a year maybe in that group, and then the third year training new ombudsmen to come on board. I'm game with I don't care how it works, but the point is this. It has to be, and there has to be checks and balances in everything, right? The checks and the balances are, 1, your term of service is short-lived. 2, it's got to be something that doesn't have so much financial benefit to it that it's corrupting in and of itself purely based upon your pay.
I still got to buy a lottery ticket?
You still got to buy a lottery ticket if you want to buy that island. Man. All right, we're going to be back in just a minute. I want to finish the show on this topic, and then we'll move on to Obama snare.
Having difficulty with your computer? Do you think it has a mind of its own? Well, don't be alarmed. This happens to everyone at some point in time. Worry no more. Computer Dave and Kyle can help you out with PC Geeks, a weekly show right here on 107.1 The Point. Tune in Thursdays at 1 o'clock to ask computer-related questions and listen to the web topic of the week. That's PC Geeks here on 107.1 The Point.
I've swum there every summer in my adult life. Every summer, there she is.
Can you name that movie?
Is it The Sandlot?
It is The Sandlot. Who's this?
Gretchen Evans.
What are you doing this morning, Gretchen?
Driving to work.
Where do you work?
At Airyback.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gretchen.
Name that movie, 7:35 with Cooper and Company. And this week is Summer Movies.
Join Cooper and Company weekday morning 6 to 8 a.m. here on the Ozarks Best News Talk, 107.1 The Point.
One of the secrets to success in heirloom gardening is keeping quality seed. Learn the basics of saving seeds July 11th at 6 p.m. at the Charles Ferguson Building in downtown Willow Springs. An expert from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds will present information and will be available to answer questions. Mark your calendar for July 11th, 6 p.m. at the Charles Ferguson Building in downtown Willow Springs.
Coast to Coast AM brings the Ozarks a whole new feel for radio. Midnight to 6 a.m. every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point. Where else would you get callers talking about everything from UFOs to war trends, from mental energy to anomalies, and from lost knowledge to aliens? Listen to experts and researchers who are part of the guest list every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk. Don't miss Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. Midnight to 6 a.m. every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point.
So that you guys understand the true concept of this, Fast Eddie is going to be our ombudsman. And he's pointing at his rear end as if I've got to kiss that if I want to get away with any dirt here. I ain't going there, baby. So the principle is, and Mike made a good point off air. Everybody, all agencies, all organizations, over time get this thing called mission creep, right? And they become fat for their own benefit. And so I recognize that. My point is that that's a frailty and a fault in human beings. That human beings consistently will always do something over a period of time, they become corrupted and they will do things for the wrong reasons. And so an ombudsman concept has to be constantly refreshed, much like our liberty should be refreshed. The tree of liberty has to be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. The same thing holds true in ombudsmanship. Now, Mike made a very good point. We'll never get this through our current political environment because Congress isn't going to allow anybody to go in there and act, one, that's going to show them up, two, that's actually going to do the job better than they are, and three, that's going to catch them in their own mistakes.
Oops.
Right. And I get it. I'm not suggesting that we can create this masterful new ombudsman program because, by the way, they'd also have to allocate an initial, pump of money or something to get the thing off the ground. But the idea, or segment off a special tax account that wouldn't go into the general fund that could be used as independent money and monitored by somebody other than them. Right? I mean, I want 3 accounting companies who actually do the books every year, but under principles of generally accepted accounting principles, or what's called GAAP. Not government accounting, which is,
right.
Let's play with the slide rule.
We can hire Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
There you go. Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. So my point is this. The concept of an ombudsman has an enormous amount of value. However, it's a principle which we're going to have to put into our hip pocket as reserved for and preserved for the post-failure of tyranny and the rise of the new republic of constitutional liberty that will come from the ashes of what we currently have. And I say that because yesterday we talked with Doreen, and one of the things she said is, I don't think there's any political solutions here. And I agree. We're so far gone at this point, folks, that we cannot expect that in 2014, we can elect a new crop of legislators who are going to go in there and blow the dirt out of this. Think of it like this. This isn't a dirty house, what we have. This is like walking into a hoarder's nightmare. And you can't just walk in there and with a broom and a vacuum clean it up. It's going to take massive heavy lifting and dumpsters lined up down the road.
A bobcat.
Right through the living room. You see, if you analogize it that way, our government is so corrupted and they've piled up so much junk for so many years, it's like a hoarder's nightmare. You ever see that show on TV where you walk in and the guy's got, this beautiful living room, but he's got a path through it that he's got to walk kind of sideways because he's got to go through the cans and the pizza boxes and the used diapers and the 47 cats running around, right? That is our House of Representatives and our Senate.
I've been there.
That is our administration. We're not going to walk in there with a dustpan and a broom and clean that. And that's what an ombudsman would look like to this current situation. Because they'd spend all their time filing charges against everybody for the next 48 months. I mean, it would be a new charge per day per person. So, not to mention the fact that government would have to approve of this because they've got to allow, in other words, the ombudsman's got to have the right to walk into a senator's office and say, open up that drawer, I'm going to take a look. Do you understand the principle here? You've got to be able to walk in there and say to the head of ICE, to the Department of DHS and say, I want to see those documents that you produced in secret. I'm going to find out if you really are buying 1.12 billion rounds of ammo and socking it away somewhere in Nevada in a massive concrete sarcophagus. We're going to find out the truth.
That would actually have to be sarcophagi.
Well, it depends on how big the sarcophagus was. Oh. And they got some pretty big sarcophagi.
Point taken.
In the deserts. So, look at how he tries to distract me, see? Where's your ombudsman skills now, Fast Eddie? You're supposed to be saying to him, hey, cut it out. You're just trying to blow smoke into the room.
Oh, I'm trying to lighten the mood.
So, I can't be light when it comes to stuff like this.
I agree that this is not possible under the current political system.
Right. But this is a hip pocket principle that everybody should be. See, look, I guess my point is this. Everything that we do right now has to be geared and designed to do and accomplish one goal. That goal is the restoration of our nation. And we have to have, there's two aspects to that. One is keeping it from sliding over the cliff into absolute, abject, 100% tyrannical totalitarianism. And the second is preparing and planning for when that does happen, because they've got the money and the resources and the planning and the scheming and the conniving and the wargaming to maybe pull it off anyway. What's the plan of action for when it happens? You see, we cannot operate in a linear fashion here. We can't say, well, we're going to take step one, and after we're completely finished with step one, we're going to start on step two. That's not how it works. We have to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 simultaneously in parallel and move all 5 forward at the same time. There's no other way for us to operate. And I get the fact that we're in way over our head, we're way under budget, we're way undermanned, we're way understaffed, and we're frankly dismayed, disappointed, and mentally worn out.
And when these guys go forward with this immigration bill, which you started the hour with, I'm thinking of what a disaster the Immigration Reform Act of 1986 is. And I'm also thinking to myself, these guys are coming out with these giant...
And you lived through that.
Yeah, these guys are coming through this giant omnibus bill that nobody can read, and they're not enforcing the laws that are currently on the books.
But, Mike, they did the same thing with guns. They did the same thing with guns.
I know.
We have plenty of gun laws on the books. They don't enforce any of them. You see, that's not what this is about. This is never about enforcing the law or creating new law. Is always it's
kabuki theater.
It's kabuki theater because the real motivation for creating new law is absolute dictatorial control.
Well, and I think it's also, look what I did. You sent me to Congress. Look what I did.
But they consider, see, that's the problem. They grade themselves based on how many new laws they pass. What we need to explain to our representatives is we grade them on how many laws they repeal.
Yeah. When's the last time they had a session of Congress whose entire focus was to repeal unnecessary, outdated, and unconstitutional laws, rules, and regulations?
Well, if they started that session today, that could run until 2014, and without 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, 364. We'll give them Christmas Day off.
I'll put up with it.
And I'll tell you what, they wouldn't even make a dent.
But I'll put up with it.
I would too.
I think everybody would put up with it.
You see, part of the restoration aspect of this in liberty is we have to come to the conclusion and recognize the realities of this. We cannot change this system politically from the inside. What we can do is hold the dike at bay while we prepare ourselves to replace it after we have taken over our government again by peaceful civil disobedience. And here's the problem, folks. This can't be a slow change like the civil rights thing. It's never going to work that way. We're so far gone that would be like slavery trying to change by civil disobedience. You see, it can't work. Because the slave masters have the law on their side, even unconstitutional as it was. They've got the guns. They've got the oppressed, beaten down slave who's mentally unprepared to become responsible for his own actions and to stand up because he's been oppressed for so long he doesn't have the courage of his convictions or the fortitude to do so. Think of it like this. How do slave revolts end? Do they ever end with civil disobedience on the part of the slaves? No. They end in revolution. Now, the only way that slavery could have been ended in the United States of America without governmental rule, as it was in the Civil War, and we can't count on that because it is government itself we're trying to kick away here. And that is, you can do it via revolution or, assuming for argument's sake that you could have gotten all the slaves to agree that on Wednesday, June 3rd, they were all going to sit down and nobody was going to work. And if they all died in their bootstraps while they sat out, then all the slaveholders would have no slaves and they'd still be bankrupted anyway.
But in that case, there was a third option.
What was that?
The third option was what the European powers did. It was called compensated emancipation. And they did it without killing 500,000 people.
But how did they? But and okay, we can't. We don't have the time because I can hear the music in the background. You're absolutely correct. My point is this: we've tried every other method. There's only two methods left open to us now.
Right.
One is massive, peaceful civil disobedience. The other is complete and absolute, total violent revolt. We can't go to option two. And we certainly have no business going to option two until we have given option one its best and most vital shot. And if you think for a moment that you can do this politically, you're smoking dope. Because the migration period is too long. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back for our next segment. Catch us at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and youtube.com America's Voice Now.
From West Plains, Missouri, it's KBMV Birch Tree, the Ozarks' best news talk.
Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. President Obama talking about trade, foreign policy, and Nelson Mandela at a joint news conference with the current president of South Africa. Fox News Radio's Emily Wither is live in Johannesburg.
President Obama paid tribute to Nelson Mandela during the conference, encouraging leaders around the world to follow his example. The president won't meet with the former South African leader, who's still in hospital, but will see his family later. Asked why he wasn't visiting his father's homeland, Kenya.
The timing was not right for me as the President of the United States to be visiting Kenya when those issues are still being worked on.
The president referring to the outstanding International Criminal Court case against the country's newly elected leader. South African President Jacob Zuma told Obama that he and Mandela both carry the dreams of millions of Africans as the first black leaders for their countries. Chris?
2 other men are now in custody in the murder case involving a former New England Patriots football star. The victim's funerals today.
Police in Miramar, Florida, say 44-year-old Ernest Wallace turned himself in without incident. He had been wanted by the North Attleboro, Massachusetts Police Department for accessory after the fact in the murder of Odin Lloyd. The 27-year-old former NFL star Aaron Hernandez is accused of killing. And another man, 27-year-old Carlos Ortiz, was arraigned in Attleboro District Court facing weapons charges. The Bristol County DA, Sam Sutter, said afterwards, "We now have in custody the 3 individuals who were in the silver Nissan at the time that Odin Lloyd got into the car at approximately 2:30 in the morning, Monday, June 17th. That is the morning of Lloyd's death, according to prosecutors." In Boston, Molly Line, Fox News Radio.
Forecast calls for highs of 120 degrees today in Phoenix and Las Vegas. You're listening to Fox News Radio, fair and balanced.
Fox News Early Prime, breaking down business news and its impact on your bottom line. Your World with Neil Cavuto.
That's how I do business. That's why I am business.
Bold positions and brash opinions on the topics America is buzzing about. The Five.
How do you think this will set in with the American people?
This will
be the pulse of the nation.
Washington insight and political know-how from the best in the Beltway. Special report with Brett Baird.
The epicenter of the political world is here.
The #1 place for fair and balanced coverage. Fox News Channel.
What's wrong with working hard to make our lives and our kids' lives better? Nothing. At Fox Business, we don't have a problem with success. We have a very big problem with those who get in the way of it. We don't come out of the box bashing those who make money, just the politicians stealing it and the bureaucracies wasting it. We're not just sitting behind a desk. We're out in the field, on the floor, with the folks. Because when a story moves forward, so do we.
Fox Business, the power to prosper. Check your local list.
The Battery Station in West Plains is your headquarters for getting and being prepared. Natural disasters, civil unrest, personal and family protection, long-term sustenance, and most importantly, peace of mind. Berkey bottles and home-sized water purification systems, survival food, MREs, freeze-dried food, survival knives, lanterns, ammunition, military sleep system, and of course, batteries of all shapes and sizes. Take charge of your own survival and security. The Battery Station, 303 Washington and West Plains, 417-257-7799 or batterystation.com.
There's one man on this earth who really, truly gets it.
I resent that when George Bush was president of the United States, I resent the fact that when he had a Republican Congress, he did not secure that border. George Bush, president of the United States, for 6 years he had support in the Congress. He massively grew the government. He massively grew our debt. Subsidies for mortgage holders. I mean, on and on and on and on. But when it came to the border, he wouldn't secure it, and he didn't.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
Are you looking to save money? Did you know that in the last 20 years, interest rates have never been this low? That's why you should make the smart call today to West Plains Savings and Loan to start your home mortgage. Just imagine how much money you'll save. Key word is save, as in savings and loan. Your loan starts here and stays here. Never would it be sold to a secondary lender. Call today, 256-3042. That's 256-3042. West Plains Savings and Loan. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
From the Point Weather Center for this morning, a mainly clear sky. It's going to be mostly sunny through the day with a slight chance for a thunderstorm. The high temperature 82 degrees. Partly to mostly cloudy tonight, low near 60. Tomorrow, mix of clouds and sun with a thunderstorm possible, high 78, sunny Monday. I'm meteorologist Jim Rinaldi. For more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
Kim Commando, aka the Digital Goddess, keeps you plugged in with a daily feature. Kim Commando's Digital Minute. This segment keeps you informed with what's going on in the technology world, along with new tips and tricks to use at home to improve those computer skills. Catch Commando at 7:22 a.m. during Cooper & Company on the Ozarks Best News Talk. If the feature has you craving more, join Kim, the Digital Goddess, Saturdays from noon to 3 on the Ozarks Best News Talk, 107.1 The Point.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles.